Thank you all for joining. My name is Maggie Peard. I'm the Town Sustainability and Resilience Officer. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's community meeting. The goal is to provide education about last year's changes to the noise bylaw and what that will mean for you. Just as a very brief introduction, these changes were brought forward through a citizens article at town meeting in an effort to reduce noise pollution, air pollution, and emissions from the use of land care equipment. And we'll go into much more details about the changes, but the most timely change that we want to make sure people know about right now is that seasonal restrictions on gas leaf blowers will go into effect on June 1st and continue through September 15th. So that's kind of why we're doing the timing of this meeting today. I'm just going to go through what our agenda is for the evening. So first, just a few introductions. Tonight we have a mix of staff and guests that will provide information for you. We have David Pinsino, who's our Director of Public Works. Chief McLean maybe is on, or we have Lieutenant Barry from the Police Department, and then Sean Dugan, our Director of Communications. And our guest who will do a presentation as well are Jamie Banks, who's the founder and president of Quiet Communities, and Dan Mabe, who's the founder and president of the American Green Zone Alliance, who will provide a little bit of education for us on the transition to electric lawn care equipment. So those are our introductions. The first thing on our agenda is going to be a presentation from Jamie and Dan about kind of the transition to electric equipment. Then we'll go into the details of the bylaw changes in Lexington, and then talk a little bit about the town's approach for education and enforcement of those changes. And then towards the end of the meeting, we'll have time for question and answers. During the presentations, I ask that you please stay muted. And if you have questions that come up, you can use the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we'll get to the questions after the presentations. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie and Dan. I'm going to stop sharing, and Jamie, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks, Maggie, and hi, everybody. My name is Jamie Banks. As Maggie said, I'm the president of Quiet Communities. I'm here with my colleague, Dan Mabe. We've actually done quite a bit of work with the town, helping its Department of Public Works to initiate a transition and become what's known as a certified green zone in some of its municipal property areas. We've also done some workshops for the town, and we're delighted to be back here now. We'll be talking generally about transitioning to low impact landscape maintenance, but then we're going to get into some specifics about the blower transition that your regulation speaks to. Let me put this in slideshow mode. Okay. Just to tell you a bit about what we're going to be talking about, the benefits of electric equipment, the business model, what it looks like now, what it looks like in the future with an electric transition, the future gas versus electric equipment, some of the important differences, the importance of education and training, the economics of transitioning to electric, and how homeowners can help to make this a successful transition. So my background is as a healthcare scientist, actually, and an environmental scientist. Dan, his background is in landscaping, and I'm just going to take a minute and let him introduce himself.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie and Maggie, and hello, David, and everyone else. Dan Mabe, founder and president of the American Green Zone Alliance. I come from the grounds maintenance industry, had my own private business, gas, worked institutionally at a cemetery, and started an all-electric business before there were actually lithium tools on the market. And started to dabble with technology and make my own lithium battery packs to interface with the equipment that was available back in 2006. So we really understand that for institutions, this is entirely doable. For private industry, though, we really feel that, you know, there are some other things that need to be considered when people are running their businesses and being asked to transition from gas to electric. And very happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And just to add to what Dan said, Quiet Communities and AGSA have worked together for nearly 10 years now. We have helped with transitions at municipalities and institutions and businesses and all kinds of things over that time. So I just want to mention that before we get into the content. Okay, so there's a lot of benefits to going electric: better health, you know, from reduced emissions, reduced noise, improved quality of life, and this applies to workers as well as the public. Obviously, a cleaner and quieter environment. We know that gas equipment is very noisy. It also has some toxic emissions, carbon emissions, and so forth. Healthier ecosystems. So just as noise and air pollution can damage our health, it can do the same to wildlife and ecosystems. There's also cost savings. So even though the cost of electric equipment is higher upfront, once a return on investment or ROI is reached, you benefit from all of the avoided gasoline, and at today's prices, that can become very, very substantial, especially with mowers, but also for handheld equipment like blowers. There's also reduced maintenance required of electric equipment compared to gas. And then lastly, really promoting a clean, green job sector. So the business model that exists today is really highly dependent on gas. So what you see here are some parameters, what they look like under the current model, this middle column, and then what it looks like in a future model that is an electric model. So the fuel for the current model, as I mentioned, it's mainly gas. In the future, battery electric. The initial investment required for gas is lower, for electric is higher, but operating costs for gas equipment are higher. And this is based mainly on the cost of gasoline that's being expended, as well as oil and those maintenance costs. And then that's going to be lower with electric because you're avoiding those costs. Work productivity is going to be higher for mowers and somewhat lower with electric mowers. With blowers, it's quite a bit higher. And I'm gonna, after I go through this, I'm just gonna stop and have Dan comment on this. So the gas equipment is more powerful. The electric equipment, even at the highest level, is quite a bit less powerful. With other hand tools like string trimmers and edgers and hedge trimmers and so forth, those are comparable in terms of their productivity. And then with the current model, especially with the use of these gas blowers, there's a customer aesthetic that's helped to drive this, that manicured aesthetic. In the future, we're hoping for economic reasons, for ecosystem health, that this model, this aesthetic becomes more relaxed and is healthier, gives us healthier soils and environments. But what has evolved as the current model enables landscapers to service a certain number of customers today. With lower work productivity under that model, you're going to have less revenues for landscapers because they just can't get through the same job as quickly. And this is a lot of why you hear landscapers say that this is something that's going to affect their revenues. So Dan, I'm just going to ask you to jump in and comment here.
Yeah, Jamie, thank you. As far as customer aesthetic, when we say manicured, we also use the term hyper manicured. When we look at more relaxed, An example of that is where a property owner will allow leaves to stay on the turf and let them be mulched with a lawnmower. Now, of course, when there's a really high volume of leaf foliage and there's a situation where safety issues can occur without a cleanup, obviously that has to be addressed or after a storm. But again, that hyper manicured expectation really is driving the run and gun, very powerful gas operations. As far as blower productivity, even the most strongest electric leaf blowers on the market, which they have certainly come a long way, and there's some on the market that are just about there, is powerful as some of their gas counterparts. I know if you come from the industry, you'll know what an Echo PB770 is, an Echo 9010, a BR 800 from Steel, and so forth. You know, those are going to be some of the stronger gas models, two-stroke on the market. Some of the electric ones that are getting up there and really gaining ground as far as performance on those models, it becomes a situation where the batteries drain so fast that it becomes economically unfeasible, because you would have to have upwards of 4 or 5 backpack batteries to keep that performance going to match their gas counterparts. And these batteries can range anywhere from $900 up to $1,700 each.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Okay, so the future for the industry is obviously vastly different. There's all kinds of new technology here for landscapers to adjust to. It includes not just the battery electric equipment that we know, but also things like robotics, solar energy, renewables, things like that, software and analytics. So it's really a major change. And as we just suggested, you know, this new equipment based on battery electric is really not directly comparable to the gas equipment. There are important differences. So it's a different technology platform. It's a different business model. There are certain criteria that are very important to consider when selecting equipment, and I'm going to go into that in just a minute. As we mentioned, work productivity is different between gas and electric. There are storage and infrastructure needs for electric that are different. You really need proper and safe electric infrastructure to support this equipment. Now, for small companies, they may be taking electric equipment and plugging it into a socket in their apartment. That's not necessarily a safe thing to do, and we'll be talking about that a little. So there's safety issues with charging and infrastructure. There's considerations of battery repurposing and recycling. We don't want these batteries to go directly into our landfills. And then having businesses get a return on investment requires that they really understand how to optimize work productivity, how to take care of this equipment, store it, charge it, etc. So you're extending its product life. Okay, Dan, why don't you talk to this slide?
Yeah, you know, just continuing on some of the, and expanding on what I was explaining before. We in the Northeast, you know, AGSA believes that it is prudent to have a seasonal ban. You know, fall is very challenging for these businesses. There's going to be businesses where their business models are contingent on the performance of gas. And then when you look at the demand of their clients and customers that just want the leaves basically kept up on, and you know, especially in the fall, they're going to have a hard time even with the strongest electric leaf blowers. And if you want to, again, replace gas leaf blowers, especially in that time of year with just electric, It's going to be a very expensive proposition. Here it says, 10 to 25% on soaked hardscape. Yes, that's true. But we've seen up to a 40% work production loss in the fall in certain working conditions. Now, in the summer and outside of a week or two of spring cleanup in the spring, it can be electric all day long. We even contend and challenge the industry and institutions to go without a spring cleanup with gas, and then only, if they need to, rely on gas leaf blowers in those very heavy times in the fall where they're expected to handle that very intense leaf foliage in those 2 months that it drops there.
Right. So Maggie, as I understand it,
You can't compete with gas and electric.
the regulation is going to be an eventual phase out of gas equipment, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and so there will have to be adjustments in how heavy fall cleanups are done when that occurs. And Dan, do you want to comment on that?
I do, because we know what we know. We're able to test some of the prototypes that are on the horizon, and we feel in 2 to 3 years, I think that the industry is going to have an electric alternative, and to be able to be both economically and workload feasible even for the fall in the Northeast. So we're on a good trajectory there. It looks very promising, but in the meantime, yes, we're encouraging that perhaps for now that gas leaf blowers may be permitted in the fall, especially where folks have that manicured or hyper manicured expectation.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So education and training are important in making this transition. For landscapers, we mentioned it's about safety, equipment selection, proper handling, storage, charging, infrastructure, performance, productivity optimization, and economics that allow them to get to ROI. And for customers, understanding really what this transition means, not only for them, but for their contractors, what the challenges are, what they can do to help. One of the things that we've done recognizing this need is that we've developed an online education course. The level 1 really is all the basics you need to know to start to transition. This is something for sustainability professionals, the land care industry, and others who are interested. A level 2 will be coming in probably the end of this year or next year. And these are some of the topics. People tend to believe that this is just kind of a one-to-one, switch out one piece of equipment for the other. And, I think with everything we've said, I hope you realize that it's just not that easy. There's really a lot to learn to do this safely, effectively, and cost effectively. Just to touch on some of the things that should be considered when selecting equipment, not all electric equipment out there is truly commercial grade and can do the work of commercial scale work day in and day out. So I'm sorry, that's just so for equipment, I don't have to read through this list, but these are some of the things. Runtime is certainly a very important consideration. And as Dan said, if you try and do exactly the same thing with electric as you're doing with gas and not adjust your practices, you can drain that battery pretty quickly. But there's also things to consider with batteries. So
yeah, Jamie, 1 second.
Yeah.
Can you back up one slide?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yes. Okay. So first of all of the education we offer is bilingual. It's in English, it's in Spanish on that. Second of all, we are brand neutral. And David knows this, who's worked with us. We actually encourage the testing. Try before you buy, if you can, of several platforms. But I can tell you this, I just received a call prior to jumping on to this Zoom gathering. And it was people that are just frustrated who purchased 2 large zero-turn electric mowers and about 20 pieces of handheld. And this particular company, who of course we will not mention because we don't impugn companies, but the success of electrification is going to be determined by what brands you choose to purchase. So we encourage everybody to look through some of the marketing and the gloss videos and all of that, and try to engage in peer-to-peer conversations and try to find out longevity-wise, performance-wise, what is actually working. So we just really encourage that. And then also you see warranty at the bottom of both of these lists. Research the warranty in detail prior to purchasing anything.
Okay, great. Dan, why don't you continue here?
Yeah, so when we say a brand, now this is Stihl. Now Stihl is actually one of the better brands out there statistically. The data that we've collected for 10 years, over 10 years, it shows that this particular platform is one of the better ones out there. Inherently safe, very reliable, but what you see here is a situation where tools were just dumped in people's hands. And now there's a lot of institutions and a lot of bright folks out there that can basically, and who will do the due diligence of reading the operating manuals and understand how to set this stuff up. But in our experience, 8 out of 10, including institutions, they just purchase stuff, and then this is what ends up happening. You can see on the left, there's a homeowner extension cord plugged into a power strip right there. There's a bunch of flammable items in that storage area. And then when we walked in there, it was a sweltering 107 degrees. Now this is here in Southern California. Nonetheless, you have, roughly, I would say about $9,000 to $10,000 worth of tools, batteries, and chargers, which they will never, ever be able to utilize the warranty on, because this is just simply gross neglect, and it's a disaster, frankly, waiting to happen. And then also, we do know of situations where there have been bans put in place, and homeowner, the gardeners who operate out of their homes, they don't leave their tools in their truck anymore and gas cans. They have to bring this stuff inside. And we know of issues that have happened. This is why we're suggesting at least a rudimentary basic level of additional information and education and training in addition to what the manufacturers typically offer. This is more ideal. You see how organized it is. These are 2 green zone projects that we've done. We're really involved in helping to set up these charging hubs. If you look on the right, there's that little green box. That actually is what we call a turnkey charging solution. Our project in Boulder, Colorado, working with the city and the county level with their new program they just rolled out, they actually covered that green box, which is a PDM, a power distribution manager, for all of the smaller companies who would have to charge inside their homes and apartments, and they resource that at 100%. So basically, it has multiple plugs on the back of it. You only need to put into one plug to preferably a 20 amp breaker, but it can be a 15 amp breaker. And then it will manage all of the different amperage draws of multiple chargers. And it will never allow the circuit to go over 16 amps. You can see everything is very well organized. it's labeled, and it has exceptional circulation in both of these places.
Okay, Dan, thank you. So we've gone over a lot of this. I know we have a certain amount of time, so, I think we can just say that, a good investment really depends on selecting the right equipment. And Dan, I don't know if you want to quickly mention this. We kind of have to.
Yeah, I look, you can go on our site, but it's just when we independently test tools, it's to make sure that people just have that data. People can basically choose whatever they want, but if there's funding being afforded, and especially if it's taxpayers or wherever it comes from, we hope that there's some due diligence even beyond us to understand what brands have produced the best results, and to make sure that when people participate in these programs, they're going to have a good taste in their mouth right out of the gate.
Okay, great. So we've been asked over the years to do some economic analyses, and this is really kind of a summary of where we are. So the aesthetic expectation is a very important driver of return on investment for the landscaper. And that's really related to things we've been talking about. If the aesthetic expectation is manicured or hyper manicured, as Dan said, you're going to need more batteries in order to get there. And the approximate time here in the Northeast for a return on investment is going to be 4 years because of that higher upfront investment. Transitional, meaning a somewhat more relaxed aesthetic, going with 2 backpack batteries. And obviously this is, just a model. But you're going to lower the time required to reach a return on investment. And then for the much more relaxed, more ecologically healthy model, you're going to do less blowing, leave leaves on the ground, like Dan said, use mulching, use alternative practices, and then shorten that time to ROI even further.
And Jamie, real quick, number 3, it's basically what we're finding out is relaxed is where blowers are only used on hardscape surfaces, and that is it.
Okay, and this is just really a repetition of what I just said, that highly manicured aesthetic going to that more relaxed aesthetic. And this is our last slide, concluding for landscapers, education, training, proper equipment are going to help to make this transition successful. And training of workers in the different aspects we've talked about, proper handling of battery and tools, all of this is needed so that their tools can have as long a life as possible and allow businesses to reach that return on investment most efficiently. How customers can help is by being aware of all these factors for businesses, what they can do in terms of their expectations that can help. And if that highly manicured aesthetic is going to be essential to them, they can do a couple of things. They can pay a higher premium for services, or they can actually purchase batteries and equipment that can be used on their properties. So there's different alternatives. This is by no means complete, but these are some of the things that we can suggest.
Yeah, and Jamie, one last thing with the customers. When I had my all-electric route, we communicated with our clientele and asked permission to access exterior plugs, to access what we call opportunity charges. It's basically probably less than 10 cents per visit. And if you do hire somebody who is transitioning to electric and you want to offer an exterior plug while they're there to do some opportunity charging, that's something that we feel that customers can help out with as well.
And this is our contact information. There's a link to that professional course for anybody that's interested. And thank you so much for the invitation to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jamie and Dan. That was really informative, and we can make these slides available on our website after the presentation. I'm now going to turn it over to Dave Pinsino, who's going to go through our bylaw in Lexington, and you'll see the details of that. Let me just share the screen again.
Yeah, if you can bring the slides up. So I'll kind of take you through where we're at today and how we got here. So in November 2021, there was a proposal brought forward to town meeting, and it was for the seasonal ban on the gas-powered blowers. At town meeting, they amended that proposal to then make it a full ban year-round on the gas-powered blowers. So that's what was passed at town meeting. In March of 22, there was a referendum vote, and the bylaw was affirmed, or that change was affirmed by the Lexington residents. And then in June of 2022, that bylaw was then approved by the Attorney General. And once that happens, then that bylaw is in effect. So if we just go to the next one. So what this did is a couple of things. It set hours of use for all landscape maintenance equipment. And that was residents weekdays 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and weekends and legal holidays 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. For landscapers, and this includes the town as well, it's weekdays from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So currently we do have that seasonal restriction, and that was put in place until the transition to the full year-round ban. So as Maggie had mentioned, it's March 15th to May 31st. So as of June 1, we'll have to be back to the electric. And then for the fall cleanups for this year and for next year, 2024, we'll have that from September 15th to December 30th. So the full ban goes into effect for landscapers and the town included, effective March 15th of 2025. The only exemption that was put in was that any lots that are an acre or more would be exempt from that. Otherwise, there's a year-round ban at that point. So there is no use of gas-powered and even seasonal at that point, except on those larger lots. For residents, that will then become in effect on March 15th of 2026. So at that point, residents will not be able to use any gas-powered leaf blowers. And I should mention that right now, this just deals with the gas-powered leaf blowers as far as switching out of gas-powered. So it's not your mowers, it's not string trimmers, it's not hedge trimmers, those types of things. Right now, it's the gas-powered blowers that are being phased out. And I think, Maggie, this will turn this one over to Captain Barry.
Hi. You guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Dave. So as it says on the slide, the police department is the enforcement authority on this bylaw. What we'd like to really emphasize is that this is a, it's important to us to enforce. However, for lack of better description, we will not be going lights and sirens to these type of calls. We'll respond to them when we have a unit available. We'll do our best to get there when the landscapers are still on scene. And when we get there, we hope to educate everyone involved between the landscaping company and the homeowners as far as the bylaw and the restrictions. And so really we're hoping to educate enough that people will become compliant. The next handout here, obviously it says what I just said here. But we're really hoping to pass out, information. We have a card, I'm sure we'll show on the slide shortly. We'll document all the complaints in our public log. If people have questions about how we responded, who we spoke with, the homeowner, the construction, the landscape company. There's an example of the postcards that we'll pass along. We'll leave one with the company. We'll pass out as many as we can. We'll leave one with the homeowner. We'll try to do our best to follow up if the homeowner's not home. And like I said, we're hoping to gain voluntary compliance. And everyone's favorite question now, what happens if there's no compliance? Who will be fined? There's a lot to that, but ultimately we're going to end the violations at the homeowners or the property owners. And we're going to not do it right away. We're hoping that, again, education provides them with enough understanding where they can speak with their companies that they hire, potentially choose companies if they don't want to abide by the rules, and then document what we get there. And if we find that the homeowner or the company is just really not getting it and they aren't believing that we're going to find anybody, then we'll use that eventual option that we have that we'd like to not use. And you can see the fine schedule there for first violation, second violation, third violation, subsequent. And again, below, because they receive a fine doesn't mean that they're excused and can continue with the violation. It should be finished at that point. So I think that's about it. Okay. Again, I jumped around, I'm sorry. Again, it speaks about the property owners being fined. And everything else I already said here. I kind of went out of order. I apologize.
I
that's
can
it.
jump back in on this slide. So we're about to go over to questions, but I think from a lot of the presentation you heard, there are challenges to making this transition. And so something the town has been working on is how to help landscapers with that transition. The most recent effort in that is through the state budget, we were given an earmark of $75,000 to support landscapers in this work. So back in March, we hosted a listening session with local landscapers to kind of understand how they would best want those funds to be used. And the outcome was that the best solution would be to order some electric handheld equipment and spare batteries that each landscaper that has business in Lexington will receive. And then that's kind of the lower, not quite as heavy duty equipment. And then we'll also be ordering several backpack electric blowers that will host at the Public Works building, and landscapers can kind of rent out and test to pilot that equipment. And we definitely recognize that kind of more help is needed for this transition, and we'll continue to look into what can be done there. But with that, I think we are set to move into questions, and Sean Dugan is going to facilitate that.
Sure. So we already have two. So in the meantime, if questions come to mind, please use the Q&A function, and I'll add you to the queue. But it looks like we already have two. The first one is a question. I have a lawn service do my yard cleanup and mowing. What if they do not have electric blowers, and how are they informed if they are not Lexington residents? There seems to be some difficulty with being able to do that herself, so she relies on these landscaping companies. Either Maggie or Dave, do you want to speak to that? And I can repeat the question if need be.
Yeah, if you can repeat it, Sean.
Sure. What if they'll so lawns, I have a lawn service company do my yard cleanup and mowing. What if they do not have electric blowers, and how are they informed if they are not Lexington residents?
So Maggie, do you have a?
Yeah, I can jump in on that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're definitely working to do education both to homeowners and landscapers. We've done some outreach already to landscapers, and they're very aware that this bylaw is in effect. So it's certainly kind of joint responsibility of landscapers and homeowners to understand this bylaw and be in compliance, but certainly it doesn't need to fall to the homeowner to then take over, you know, your land care, because landscapers are aware of this and will be working to make that transition as well.
I'll also mention that when we reached out to local landscapers, we had a list of about over 150 email addresses from our compost facility who drop off at our compost facility. So we've been doing our best to reach out to the community, the landscape community, but a lot of the companies are aware of this bylaw. So, okay. Our next question is, I live in a rental apartment complex in Lexington with heavy use of gas-powered landscaping equipment. Am I protected by the new bylaw in equal measure, or have exceptions been carved out for apartment complex owners? If the latter, could the exceptions be specified along with the reasoning behind them? So our our apartment complex is protected by the bylaw in equal measure.
Yeah, there's no exemptions for different housing complexes, so equal protection.
Do we know why, or could you speak to why there aren't exceptions? I think we could say that there are there's the 1 acre exception that will come out in the future, but other than that, it was discussed on town meeting floor. This is a citizen petition. So Maggie, I'm not sure if you know from prior conversations if there was any reasoning, what the reasoning was behind that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about what the discussions were on that previously, but I think the main exemption is just the 1 acre. So I think large rental apartment complex, if it's over 1 acre, then it would be exempted. So really the thinking there was on size of the property rather than type of property.
Thank you. This next question is for Captain Barry. How many violations were reported last summer and how many fines were levied?
So I wish I had that exact number for you, but being summer through it, we responded to probably maybe 24 at the most. Every one of our responses was education-based, and we did not levy a fine last year. We're trying to gain compliance. We did not have the postcards to hand out, but we did make them aware of the law, which was relative surprised a lot of the landscapers at that time. We feel like a year later now we're in good standing that they do know. A lot of them have had questions about it aside from this meeting. And so to answer your question, a couple of dozen and no fines.
Thank you. The next question, is there a limit to the number of blowers on one property at one time? Landscapers in the neighborhood use 3 blowers at one time, so deafening that no one can work from home or even carry on a conversation. If it's a gas-powered leaf blower during this the seasonal restriction, it doesn't matter if there's 1 or 3. They would be restricted.
And when they are allowed to be used, Sean, there is no restriction as to the number. It's just that the date restriction is what it is.
Right. Thanks, Dave. Okay. Some other comments that were made, but I'll skip to the questions. I've heard from people who have reported violations that they identify were revealed to the property owners by the police who followed up. Is that standard protocol? This is a disincentive for reporting violations if that's the case.
So again, that's a great question. There are times when the reporting party is revealed. Sometimes the homeowner is asking who reported it. We're not about sharing exact names. We might say it was your neighbor. We can definitely steer clear of that. I think it's probably a better practice to steer clear of it than to start a neighbor versus neighbor issue. We also would encourage neighbors, if they could, to meet their neighbors and explain to them that, you know, that's a violation, or, you know, the noise is bothering you before it got to us. But again, that's our job to go out there and answer to it. But it would be beneficial for us not to reveal, and that sometimes is taken tough by the accused party, especially when we're talking with the homeowners. They want to know who pointed it out. But again, something we have to deal with.
Thank you. Again, we got a couple of comments that came in, and we'll definitely take note of those as well. But are there any other questions?
Looks like one came in the chat.
The electric blowers are, well, it seems more like a statement, but the electric blowers are just as loud as are the electric blowers as loud as the gas ones? Does Dan, you want to speak to that?
You know, that's funny. I'm glad that question came in, because that's the one thing I overlooked to mention. We can send you guys the model numbers, but anecdotally speaking, there is no doubt that there are some commercial electric models on the market now that really don't give any improvement to the noise issue, because they are under so much pressure to design electric leaf blowers to be as powerful as their gas counterparts, and then they kind of skip through some of the quality attributes that could create lower sound. And definitely there are some models to be on the lookout for that are just really not really much an improvement.
Yeah. And this is why, you know, this is why equipment selection is so important. In fact, several years ago, Dan and I worked with the state procurement department and helped them develop the first technical specification for battery electric equipment. And one of those criteria was that the noise level be at a certain level at 50 feet. And what we've seen until recently, you know, without this push, is that the quality blowers, commercial grade blowers, are about 10 decibels lower at the ear of the operator, which translates to half as loud as to the human ear. And I just want to point out the other difference between noise from gas and electric equipment that's important is that the sound from the gas blowers has a very strong low frequency component because of the internal combustion, the explosions that are required to drive those engines. You don't have that strong low frequency component with the electric blowers. And the reason that's important is because low frequency sound components enable loud noise to travel further and more readily penetrate into walls and windows. And, you know, from residents' perspective, that's one of the things that is really frustrating, is that you can't walk into your house, close the door, and have that sound go away. With electric equipment, that is more easily done. It does not as readily penetrate through walls and windows. The sound dissipates over a much shorter distance. So it's not just the decibel level, there's other important characteristics of sound to consider between the two technologies.
Yeah, but you're right, exactly, Jamie. But some of the electric models, they're inlet. The sound is produced from where the air comes in through the back, not where it comes out through the nozzle. You're hearing the sound that is going through the inlet. And for example, you'll have certain brands that will have sound absorbing foam lined in there. They're definitely, with some of the electric models on the market, because they're so powerful and they've been manufactured to be as cheap as possible in materials and some of the design features, you're going to have a very unpleasant, high-pitched, harmonic, whistly sound, if you will, with some of them. And those are the ones that are kind of being identified by folks that are bothered by all leaf blower noise.
Great, thank you. So there was another question, or going back to the question about apartment complexes. It says, so there was an exception, which means apartment complex residents are not equally protected. I'm concerned about the 1 acre exception. Most apartment complexes in Lexington are over an acre. Does this mean that those of us in apartment complexes won't benefit from both the eventual phase out as well as time restrictions? There isn't specific, actually, Dave, do you wanna speak to that?
Well, yeah, so as of right now, it's exempting properties that are an acre or more. So that's what was written into the bylaw. That's what was passed at town meeting, passed the referendum vote, and got approved by the Attorney General. So any changes to that would have to go back through town meeting to change a bylaw. Doesn't mean it can't be done, but that's what we would have to do it that way. So right now, acre or more, those are going to be exempt once we get to 2025.
But they're not exempt from the seasonal restrictions. Is that
Correct.
right?
The seasonal restriction is still in place right now.
And also just add that it doesn't specifically call out, like Maggie had said before, it doesn't specifically call out types of properties that are exempt as well. So, and then this isn't so much of it is a question, but is it naive to think that we could go back to lawn care practices that were the norm before gas-powered leaf blowers, such as rakes, tarps, brooms, etc.? That's definitely a practice that could be employed, but maybe Dave wants to make another comment towards that.
So depending on the property, that's time and money. I know from a town standpoint, we would not have the staff nor the time to do something like that with town properties, especially in spring and fall. So that's something that you can talk to your landscapers about, or if you do it on your own. There may be companies that do that, but it is time consuming and costly and requires a lot of staff.
Right. Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A at this moment. I'll speak slowly in the event that someone's typing, just because, but we do, in case there is one that comes in, but in case there isn't, we do want to thank everyone for taking the time. We just did want to have some sort of a community forum where folks could learn more about the bylaw before it goes, the seasonal restriction goes into effect next week. But this information is available on our website at lexingtonma.gov/landscape noise, which has all the details about the bylaw as well as frequently asked questions. And I encourage you to go check that out, and to we'll have the recording as well as the presentation materials there as well, so you can refer back to it in the future.
Sean, there is one more question in the chat.
Let's see, chat. What about all the other equipment that is used every day? I'm sorry, the sentences, like chainsaws and compact use, etc., why only blowers? Again, this was a citizen petition that was put forward at town meeting, and they had specified specifically gas-powered leaf blowers. So I can't personally speak to the intent of the citizen petitioner who put that forward, but that was an active town meeting that was debated, and so I can't speak any further to why they decided not to include chainsaws or other small machinery. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. It looks like we're approaching 7 o'clock. Our contact information is available on the town website, and all the details, like I had mentioned, are up there. So please reach out if you have any questions, and hope you all have a great evening.
I have a question.
Sure.
I put 2 questions in the Q&A. Apparently they didn't show up.
Let's see. There are a couple that I thought they were just declarative statements. If you want to speak more to them, if you have a specific question.
Well, I do. My name's Marty. I'm a town resident for 68 years. I have an issue with the landscape maintenance equipment definition, specifically the part where it says, and other equipment used in landscaping or lawn care. What exactly does that mean? That, as written and as punctuated, that means virtually anything used in landscaping: rakes, shovels, weeders. It's a very ambiguous definition.
So is the what I'm looking for the question? What's the question?
What does it mean? What is included? What is other equipment? What is other equipment used in landscaping or lawn care? What is the exact definition of that?
Dave, would you be able to speak to that?
Well, so there is a group headed by the town manager that is reviewing the definitions and things in the bylaw. And their hope is to go ahead and clarify that for everybody. In respects to leaf equipment, it was, like walk behind blowers, gas powered blowers, that kind of thing that were associated with leaf cleanup. That's the only clarification that I have, but they are working on definition clarifications right now, and they hope to have those out in the near future.
So, as presently written and prior to these clarifications, I can't use a lawn rake as a resident outside of the hours stated, Monday through Friday, 7 to whatever it is, and Saturday and Sunday 9 to 5. Is
And
that
so I think the intent was for anything that is powered equipment.
Oh, but that's the issue, as punctuated, and you will read it. It doesn't say, it should say, and other gas or electric powered equipment used in landscape, but it doesn't say that. It says, and other equipment used in landscaping or lawn care. And again, as I mentioned, that is virtually anything.
Yeah, and that's why they're going to be looking to clarify all of that. So, when
is that
what they come up
clarification
with.
coming?
I know that they're working on it. I'm not on that group, but I am, I would think it'd be in the near future.
Okay, and the second part of my question is on paragraph 2, section 6, effective March 15th, 2026. The use of all gas-powered leaf blowers by residents on their own property in the town of Lexington shall be prohibited. So I can go on my neighbor's land and clean the leaves that blow from my tree on his land, and there won't be an issue using a gas-powered leaf blower after March 15th, 2026. Is that a true statement?
And so I think, again, that's part of the clarification that they'll be updating.
But okay, but as of now, until it gets updated, that holds true. All right, and the other thing is, I had asked during town meeting where they were discussing this to define gas leaf blowers. because there are several companies out there that offer propane powered leaf blowers. And propane is a gas, gasoline is a liquid. So I just asked for some clarification of the definition of a gas powered leaf blower. And that town meeting did not address that. That I would suggest you actually put a definition of a gas powered leaf blower in the revisions.
We will take, both of those points are well taken, and when we'll be sure to share that with the town manager as he's going through that clarification process.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Seeing no one else, we will end here. And again, thank you all for your time and for making the time to be available for this meeting. Have a good night.